Yep.
Okay, guys. So in this video, we're going to talk about as a group. We're going to talk about some of the structures we can see as they pertain to the digestive system. The first structures we're going to start with are the salivary glands. Now, I have three different types of salivary glands, or three different names. These things. The first one we'll see is called the parotid gland, which is over here, right next to the ear. This large salivary gland over here next to the ear. That's the parotid. So it's P-A-R-O-T-I-D, parotid gland. Okay. Now we also have two other salivary glands we can see from this view. The first one we can see is called the sublingual gland here, because it's just below the tongue. That's the sublingual gland. Okay. Sublingual. And then below that is the submandibular gland. That's the submandibular gland. Okay. So sublingual gland, there, below the tongue. Submandibular gland, even below that. Okay. And then parotid gland, over here by your ear. So parotid. Okay. Now, for the next structures, we're going to talk about the hard palate, soft palate, and tongue. So we'll see that from this medial view here. And the hard palate is the bony part here. Okay. So the hard palate's going to be made up of the maxilla and the palatine bone. That's just the bony part of the roof of your mouth. That's the hard palate, made of palatine and maxilla bone. Now, the very posterior part of the hard palate, where the bone disappears, that's called the soft palate. That's going to be kind of hard to see. You might need to get closer or something. But that's the soft palate right there. Back in there. It's just no longer bony tissue. It's actually muscle tissue. That's soft palate. So part of the soft palate is the uvula. That's that little thing that dangles down the back of your throat. So that's why I just uvula. Okay. For the next structures, we're going to talk about the esophagus, the stomach, pyloric sphincter, duodenum, some other structures on there as well. So we're going to first see the esophagus on here. Let's see if we can find it behind the heart. Good. So if I take the heart off here, we can see just posterior to the heart, this sort of gold-looking tube there, that's the esophagus. So it turns out the esophagus runs just posterior to the heart there. Okay? And now the esophagus will continue down even more inferiorly. It goes through the respiratory diaphragm here into the stomach, which is here. Okay, so if I remove the liver, you'll see that better. So here's the stomach. This is where the esophagus meets the stomach, just past the respiratory diaphragm. Okay, so this is the stomach itself, just sort of inferior to the liver. Okay. Now, one of the structures in the stomach you need to know is the pyloric sphincter. Okay? If you guys remember in lecture, we talked about how there's lesser curvature, greater curvature. There was the lower esophageal sphincter here, but the one for lab you need to know is called the pyloric sphincter. And the best way to see that is if I remove this piece of stomach, this sort of little enlargement of muscle tissue there in the wall of the stomach, that's the pyloric sphincter right there. Now the pyloric sphincter is what separates the stomach from the duodenum. Okay, so that little enlargement of muscle tissue there, that's the pyloric sphincter. Okay. Now the pyloric sphincter, like I said, is a structure that separates the stomach from the duodenum. So that means that this here is the duodenum, right there. So the duodenum is the beginning of the small intestine. The first part of the small intestine is the duodenum. Okay. Now within the duodenum, we'll have these circular folds called plicae circularis. And that's what we can see here. If you guys look on this part of the duodenum, see all those little folds there in the tissue? They almost look like little ridges. Those are called plicae circularis, which are just like intestinal folds. Now their function is to help increase surface area in the intestine, so you get better absorption. Okay? So those are plicae circularis, those little folds within the duodenum. Okay, now you find them along the length of the small intestine, so you find it like in the jejunum and ileum as well. Now, what's interesting is that the duodenum is closely associated with the pancreas and the liver, so that the bile duct from the liver will meet up with the pancreas, and they meet at something called the hepatopancreatic ampulla. Okay? Now, I'm not sure if we can see it on here. Let me see if I can remove this and find it. No, we don't see it on here. That's all right. So the hepatopancreatic ampulla would be a little enlargement right around here where the pancreatic duct meets the duodenum. So this is the pancreas right here, you guys, this sort of gold tissue, okay? And all these little white lines there, that's the pancreatic ducts, okay? And so where the pancreatic duct meets the duodenum, there would be a little enlargement called the hepatopancreatic ampulla. I don't see it on this model. I think it's on other models. We'll have to check that out in a little bit, okay? But it would be where the pancreatic duct and bile duct meet the duodenum. It's a little like enlargement, okay? Now, the middle part of the small intestine is called the jejunum. So remember the first part's the duodenum. So that means that somewhere in here is the jejunum, right? I can't really show you specifically where that jejunum is, but basically it's going to be the middle of the small intestine somewhere. Okay, not the beginning. Yeah, exactly. So not the beginning, not the end, but the middle is jejunum. Now the difference is actually in histology, which we're not going to go to the level of detail. So you guys don't have to know that. But they're pretty much divided into about thirds. So the first third is the duodenum, the second third is the jejunum, the last third is the ileum. Okay? So think about this as like the middle third, the jejunum. Okay? Now the end of the small intestine is called the ileum. And that's what we can see here. So see all this little coiling there? And then all of a sudden we get a hole. Now normally there should be a hole there. The hole in this model is where the ileum, which is the end of the large intestine, where that meets the large intestine. Did I say large? Okay, end of the small intestine. That's where it meets the large intestine. So this is the ileum. In fact, that hole there would connect to the large intestine, but I gotta put this back together first really quick. It's hard to show this like fluidly. Let me put this back in. Okay, so that's back in place. Okay. In fact, this piece would go here. So you guys see this sort of maybe like dark purple, kind of brown looking structure here? I'm not even sure what color that is. That's all large intestine. Okay. Now the first part of the large intestine we'll talk about, if I remove all that back there, is the cecum. So here's the cecum. In fact, this is the end of the small intestine, which is the ileum. And so where the ileum meets the cecum, they form a valve called the ileocecal valve. Okay. Now, that ileocecal valve is on your list. Let me show you that. So if I remove this piece, you should see the valve. So the ileocecal valve is right there, where the tube of the ileum, or small intestine, meets the tube of the large intestine. They form a valve there called the ileocecal valve, and that helps prevent backflow. Like, it's going to help prevent, feces and things like that from getting back into your small intestine. So that's the ileocecal valve. That's the ileum. That's the cecum. So the middle, ileocecal valve. Okay? And the cecum is the first part of the large intestine. Now, on the cecum, we'll find a structure called the appendix. The true anatomical word for it is the vermiform appendix. And vermiform means worm-like. So if we look at this, you can see it looks like a worm. I gotta take this off. This right there. This large structure right there. It's actually a lot larger than what you find in reality. But this is the vermiform appendix. Right there. This like little finger thing sticking off. That's the vermiform appendix. You guys can just call it the appendix, that's fine. But that's the vermiform appendix. Okay? Now the function of the appendix is actually help store some of your good bacteria. So like if your gut gets populated with bad bacteria, then some of the good bacteria can help repopulate the gut from the appendix. Okay? Now the large intestine is divided into a couple different parts. We'll have, like one we talked about already was the cecum, which was here, okay? Now the thing is that the rest of the large intestine is named for the way that feces travel, okay? So this first part here, this is the ascending colon, because feces would ascend at that point, right? Like go up. So ascending colon. Then we'll have the transverse colon, because it goes transversely across, okay? Then we'll have the descending colon as it goes down, okay, because the feces would be descending at that point. And then we'll get the sigmoid colon, which forms this like S right here. That's the sigmoid colon, okay. And then we'll get the rectum, which is actually in there. So I'll remove this piece. So I got to remove this chunk. This is like a pelvic chunk. Okay, so this is female. I should make sure. This one. So here's the rectum right here. Okay, so the end of the large intestine, the rectum, and then we'll have anus. So rectum and then anus. Okay. If you guys want to see the cross section, it looks kind of cool. So here's the rectum. This is the anal canal right there. And these are called the anal sphincters, which help prevent like feces and stuff like that from just slipping out. Okay. So there's actually both smooth muscle and skeletal muscle. So you can actually use like skeletal muscle to keep it in. You know what I mean? Like, did you guys ever see that movie? Was it like Amazing Race or something like that? Rat Race? Yeah. And the little girl was talking about how they needed to pull over because she was prairie dogging.